Howdy ladies and gentlemen, this is the Hypersonic 55 and welcome to another film review, and today's film review will be on the re-release of the first prequel film in the Star Wars series, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, in 3D! Not that that part really matters though. Oh, and before I go into this review, let me just go back and say that there will be some minor spoilers lurking around, so just wanted to point that part out. Now, when I found out that the Phantom Menace was actually going to be re-released in the cinema again, and in 3D, I was like, what the hell? Why? Doesn't George Lucas have enough money already? And isn't this the film that the majority of the fans actually hate? So why would you do that? Why? So I investigated online and then found out that this was going to be the first part of 6 films to be re-released in the cinema again in 3D. So then I was like, oh, good gravy. I should have seen this one coming. I mean, with all the Star Wars films being released on home video several different times, with several different editions and several different updates in each one, it should come as no surprise that Star Wars would eventually find its way back into the cinema with an edition of 3D, which would be completely pointless. I mean, every film is being post-converted into 3D, even if the end result is not an entirely necessary one. But yeah, you know what, I was thinking, maybe I might just go back and see it just for the sake of nostalgia. So after around 15 years, does the film still hold up? Well, yes and no in a lot of ways. It really does depend on what kind of Star Wars fan you are, whether you like the prequels or whether you despise them, and it also depends on what kind of film fan you are as well. But for me, I happen to like it a lot. Now, when it comes to the plot of Episode 1, I'm not going to bother explaining the plot because most people who've seen Star Wars know what the deal is already. But for those who haven't seen it, here's a small summarization. The Phantom Menace is basically meant to be the starting point of the entire Star Wars film saga, giving us a story of a world set before the original trilogy, and explaining the origin of one of the most pivotal characters in all of the films, Anakin Skywalker. This film gives us his origin story as well as an insight into the world of the Jedi before they became extinct, and it also introduces us to whole new worlds and characters who happen to play a big part in the events that lead up to the original trilogy of the films, A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. Now, the story for what it is happens to be a pretty decent one, but it also doesn't happen to fit into the world of Star Wars, with all this talk of government and trade federation and all these long-winded conversations about stuff that has got nothing to do with the main plot. I'm sure it happens to have some sort of relevance overall, but compared to the original trilogy that happened to have like a much more streamlined and more logical sense, this film just happens to come across as really messy and convoluted for its own good. But again, for what it is, it happens to showcase a lot of interesting characters before they happen to make their way into the original Star Wars trilogy. And it's just nice to see some of these characters in their much younger days before they became the people that we knew and loved in the original trilogy. But The Phantom Menace was never about story, it was all about the presentation, and let me just say this, The Phantom Menace still happens to hold up pretty well, and it happens to be, in a lot of ways, some of the best aspects of the original prequel film. Say what you want about the story, but when it comes to the action and soundtrack of The Phantom Menace, it happens to deliver on so many levels of awesomeness. The CGI work is just fabulous and happens to bring this whole new world of Star Wars to life in a lot of ways. Everything from the futuristic world of Coruscant to the Gungan fight against the droid army looks pretty cool. The pod racing on Tatooine is still as amazing as ever. It's immense, it is crazy, it is lovely. But the best part of The Phantom Menace will always be the Jedi fights, and they are incredible. The lightsaber fights in this film are just maddening. It is just incredible. The best fight ever is the duel between Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan, and Darth Maul. It is just wow. I've seen it so many times as a kid and I've watched it throughout my years and I will never get tired of watching this. It is one of the best fights I'd ever seen, ever. It's perfectly choreographed, it is brutal, it is badass, and it happens to feature one of the best uses of orchestrated music ever. The song Duel of the Fates is one of the best orgasmic songs in the history of life, I will admit that. I could watch that scene of those Jedi fighting for the rest of my life and I would never get bored. And speaking of the music, John Williams happens to craft a brilliant soundtrack for Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. It is just fantastic, it is immense, and John Williams can do no wrong. And I don't think I could talk about the presentation of the film without mentioning the 3D aspect of the film. Did it add anything to the film? No, absolutely not. This film did not need to be post-converted into 3D, it was irrelevant, it was unnecessary, and it's only noticeable for like the first 10 minutes. Unlike other 3D movies like Avatar and Kung Fu Panda 2, where the 3D actually has presence and is actually relevant to the actual movie and showcases some actual depth. Nothing was actually relevant in episode 1, and it was really unnecessary in my opinion. I would have gladly watched this film without the 3D release, and it still would have made my day. But 3D was there and it was unnecessary. And one other aspect I need to mention is the fact that this film happens to be the Blu-ray re-release of Star Wars. So it's not the original theoretical release, but the one that came out as part of the whole 6-film box set that showed up a few months ago. So it has all the additional scenes and updated visuals and a much crisper picture overall. You can tell just from looking at it in the first few minutes that the film happens to look a lot cleaner than it did before. While some of these new additional scenes aren't completely necessary and don't necessarily add to the film, there are certain scenes where the new scenes are partially necessary and they do add a little bit of nice stuff to the film, but overall, yeah. So overall, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace in 3D is still pretty much a good laugh. I like the film, mainly for the sake of nostalgia. While this may not be the most well-regarded Star Wars film in the entire series, I would gladly watch it again because it's just fun. There is just so much nostalgic qualities in this film that I just cannot ignore it. Plus, it was just really hilarious to hear those aliens from the Trade Federation talk. When I went to see this with my friends, it was the best time ever. We were quoting along with the movie and laughing at all those horrible accents. It was the most hilarious thing ever in the history of life. It was just great. So overall, I was going to give the movie an 8 out of 10 purely because it works on the nostalgic level and it still happens to be one of the more entertaining films that I've seen in the cinema for a while. I just happened to have a great time watching it in the cinema with my best mates, and yeah, I cannot wait to see what the other films will look like when they come out in the cinema. So yeah, that has been my review, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you found it informative and look forward to the next one when it shows up. So until the next time, people, this is the Hypersonic 55 signing out.